Do you owe more than your house is worth? This quick video is just going to show you some of the principles of how to be able to go around this issue. In fact, some people are asking, I owe too much or I can't afford my mortgage. So what are my options? We're going to be looking at the very big problem that is attacking many of our home families, and that is over-leveraged mortgages. In fact, 25% of American homes today have loan balances that exceed their home values. So let's look at 7 different options that have been made available to you by lenders. So number 1, the first option you have is remain in your home. Right? So if you stay in your house, you're going to have to keep paying the mortgage. You're going to have to keep increasing your debt because every time you pay, you increase your good credit rating. But then the real problem occurs is, but what if you cannot afford the payment? What if there's an issue in your family? Maybe there was a life change or a loss of income or divorce, or worse yet, maybe there's some form of illness. So trying to remain in your home is an option, but sometimes not very doable. Now you have a second option, and that second option is to rent your home. Well, some people are forced to have to rent their home, but renting your home is not as easy as it sounds. Most of the time, it's kind of playing like tug of war, because you got to make sure that number 1, your credit stays intact if you actually find a renter who's actually pay the monthly rent without missing or without fail to make sure that you pay your original loan. But then you also have to worry about, how do I find a quality renter? Will they take care of my property? I still have to take care of taxes. I still have to take care of maintenance. I still have to take care of repairs. So even though you are renting your property, there's still a great expense involved in renting your home. So let's look at the third option. The third option is called a deed in lieu of foreclosure. What happens here is you basically give the house back to the bank and say, hey, I'm done with this, but now you will have to leave the house. When you give a deed in lieu of foreclosure back to the bank, it is a possible way to avoid foreclosure, especially if you have been missing payments. So there's a couple of issues. Some banks will not accept a deed back to them because they want to put that legal, binding contract that you signed that you would pay that mortgage, because now it's becoming an unperforming note. So now you're forcing them to lose money on that note. So even if they did accept it, you would get a credit hit on your credit, and then the bank can possibly put a judgment lien against you for that unpaid balance. If the house was worth $150,000 and you still owed $100,000 on that house, they could put a judgment against you and all of your credit that you still owe them $100,000, even though you gave them a deed to your property. Let's look at the fourth option. Well, the fourth option is mortgage modification. I'll be very honest with you, I have done real estate for over 15 years, and less than 10% of people that I see trying to do a modification actually get approved. Nationwide, it is actually less than 10%. So if the lender agrees to do a modification on your loan after receiving all documentation, filling out paperwork, them reviewing all of your debt to income ratio, if they look at all of that and they agree, then they can make a possible affordable payment process for you. But that doesn't mean they forget all the debt you owe them, the fees or the charges. They're just going to roll them all into the loan because the bank never loses. So what are the cons? Well, the cons are it is very difficult to qualify. Why? Because if you're having problems paying your mortgage, that means there's been a reduction of income coming into your house in some way, shape, or form. So what they're going to try to find out is how much money are you actually making. So therefore, it's going to be tons of forms. Your credit will take a hit. And sometimes, even though you tried everything that you possibly can, you even send them backup payments, you even give them an extra $1,000 here and $1,000 there, you filled out all the forms, you mailed them all in, and lo and behold, the bank never got your forms. So by the time you try to modify the loan, you may have to actually end up moving anyway. And it's unfortunate because it has not been very successful to many home owners. So let's look at the fifth option. The fifth option is something called a short sale. Basically what you say to the bank is, hey bank, I'm going to try to sell my house and hopefully somebody comes and buys my house, but would you allow them to purchase it for less than what I owe? So if my house is worth, for instance, let's say you owe them $150,000 and you put the house up on the market and by a miracle you're able to sell that house in less than 6 months, because it is a short sale and short sale take a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of paperwork, and many real estate agents don't like to deal with short sales because they're not going to get paid in the next 30, 60, 90 days. Sometimes they don't get paid till 120 days if the house sells. And even during the short sale, you still have to keep paying your mortgage. So if the house takes 6 months, you would have to still be paying 6 months of payments on that house to try to get off the short sale. But if it does sell, then the loan is paid off and the house is sold. Except that because the bank allowed a short on that mortgage payment, which let's say is $150, somebody bought it for $130, there was still a $20,000 deficit from that loan. The bank can still come and they can put a judgment against you for the $20,000 that they ended up losing. So it ends up becoming a real struggle. Over the years, many short sales are hard to complete because the banks make it so difficult, because every time you call, you are transferred from so many different departments, and half of the time, nobody helps you with that file. So it becomes such a difficult task. Let's look at option number 6. Option number 6 and says, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and let the bank foreclose on my loan. I don't care about the house anymore. And you're hoping that this whole mess just goes away. Well, that is a possibility. If you allow the house to go to foreclosure because you can no longer pay your debt, you weren't able to sell it, you weren't able to do a short sale, you weren't able to modify, and sometimes people end up thinking this is my only way out. Let me just let them foreclose on the property. Well, some very bad things will happen. Number one, your credit will absolutely be shot completely. So for the next 7 to 10 years, you will have very low credit. Banks will not lend you money, so you're not going to be able to buy a house for another 7 to 10 years. You'll also, creditors may start coming at you because now that they realize that you've been foreclosed on, they're thinking, now we need to collect our debt. So every possible creditor that you can think of is going to start calling you for their money. But then, if the house forecloses on you and you still owe them $150,000, the bank can put a judgment against you and sue you for the $150,000 of delinquency. And believe me, the bank will put all their resources to go after a person after they've been foreclosed. Not a nice picture. The 7th option that you have is something called bankruptcy. Of course, bankruptcy, you basically go to your bankrupt attorney, you fill out all the paperwork, you pay a bank attorney all of the money that you can possibly have for them to do the process. It is not fun. It is money out of your pocket. You're going to have to come out with money to fill out every form, or spending time with the attorney and filling out all the paperwork, and hopefully after your bank process and after you've depleted all of your funds, which you didn't have because you didn't have to go bankruptcy if you had the money to pay for your mortgage, but now you have to use that money to hopefully pay for a bankruptcy attorney. So the debt will go away. The bank forecloses still, but now you're definitely going to have an absolute credit loss for the next 10 years at the minimum that you've gone through bankruptcy. It is a very unpleasant process. So now let's look at this. There is a solution for you if your house is over leveraged. It is something called ACE. It is a program that we have designed for homeowners. It is that very new option that we want to give to you, and it absolutely solves your problem. So how does that work? ACE means Assigned Contract and Terms System. It is our award-winning program because it helps homeowners that are in this dilemma, and those other 7 options are just not the options that you want to follow. So what are some frequently asked questions that we get? Well, what is ACE? ACE is something called a lease optioning of your home. Your home is over leveraged, and so what we do is we come in and we create a lease option with you where you allow us to find what we call a tenant buyer. There's many tenant buyers out there. We have a long list of them that maybe not be able to qualify for a loan to purchase a house today, but they do have money to become a tenant buyer. So with the option to buy your property, we assign that option to a third party or the tenant buyer that in the distant future, they're going to be able to qualify for a loan to purchase that property. So what is the length of the lease when we do this type of deals? Well, if your house is over leveraged, we can go anywhere between 5 to 10 years because it takes that long for them to build equity in the house to be able to refinance a house and then purchase that house. So the buyer needs to get a new loan, but the terms of that lease may be shorter depending on your loan and on your balance. So it's always different depending on your situation. How much will it cost me, you may be asking? Absolutely nothing, because when the buyer refinances, they're going to pay their side of the closing costs. You'll probably cover your side of your closing costs, but when we do the lease option agreement, there will be no funds out of your pocket. So in a sense, you're not having to deal with any more cost out of you in most circumstances. So let's look at other questions. When does the rent begin? Normally about 1 month after we find the tenant buyer. So somewhere between 30 to 60 days after we sign a lease agreement with you. So other people will ask, well, what if they tear up my house? Well, no, they won't, because first of all, we're going to find quality tenant buyers. Number two, tenant buyers are going to have a financial stake in that property. So when they have a financial stake in it, they're going to treat it as their own according to the agreement that we signed with them. So they are going to be responsible for all the repairs of that property. So that contract will be focused as a focused direction for them to become a homeowner of that property. So when you become a homeowner, you will take care of that property, just as you have with your property now. Well, what about the paperwork? Well, the paperwork is called a lease purchase agreement. We sign that agreement with you. We take it to the attorney. The attorney gets all the documents ready, and we close with a real estate attorney so that everything is done above board and everything is 100% legal and Texas compliance of real estate. So what if the tenant buyer never closes? Well, the goal is to have a tenant buyer that's whole focus is to close on that house to make it their own. So every month they're going to be paying monthly mortgage or the monthly rent to you that goes straight to the monthly mortgage. And as they do, they're building equity. So as they're building equity in that property, nobody's going to want to walk away from all the money they've invested into a property. That's part of the process of building equity. But then if all else fails, if for some reason they can't, we just get a brand new buyer into there and we continue paying that monthly rent. Now, do I make any money if they buy? Well, the answer is no. The reason why is because more than likely, if you've been over leveraged, that means you do not have enough equity in the property to make any funds from the property. But what your great solution is that you get to get up and walk away from that over leveraged mortgage while it's still being with a tenant buyer. So the buyer leases the option, and as they're building the equity and then they refinance that property, then we cash you out, which means they end up refinancing, pay off the loan, and then you walk away and as they move forward with that property. Now, will I have to pay for repairs? You may be asking yourself. Well, our answer is, well, only for about the first 30 days to make sure that you're taking care of the property until we put somebody else in there. Now, this is why we want to make sure that you disclose everything regarding your property, every problem, every issue that it's ever had. If we find out later that you did not disclose that information, then you, yes, will be liable to fix that repair before we put that tenant buyer in there. Once we put them in there and you've disclosed all of that information to us, then the tenant buyer will be responsible for all of the repairs moving forward. So, last three questions is, well, what is my responsibility, you may ask yourself? Well, for you to get the house ready, you're going to help us approve the tenant buyer, so you're going to have a reasoning into it as well, and you'll reside in that property until we put that tenant buyer in there so that property is being maintained. Well, what if you don't find a buyer? Well, normally we do find a buyer within the first 60 days, but after 60 days, if you feel that we are not finding the tenant buyer appropriately, you can cancel the contract, or we can renegotiate and you can give us a couple more months or days to be able to try to find that perfect buyer. But most of the time, we always find buyers within the first 30 days just because of the overwhelming response of people wanting to buy a house. Now, what if I'm not over leveraged? That's a very good question. Why? Because there's many different options that we can work with you. We can still do a lease option. That's one possibility. Another option is that we buy the house and we take over your debt immediately. So now we end up paying all the closing costs, we pay all of the fees, and there's absolutely no commissions. So if your house is not over leveraged, but you do want to sell your house, or for some reason you want to move, we're absolutely the solution to you. And it costs a lot less for you to sell the house to us than having to go through regular real estate where you have to pay commissions, fees, and charges. So you're saving so much more. So this is what you need to do next. Here are 4 very easy steps to move forward. Number 1, we ask you to go to housescash.com and you click on the tab Sell Your House. Then you fill out a property information form so we can know about your property and the information to contact you. And with that, it'll help us understand where your situation is and how we can best help you solve this issue. Or you can pick up the phone and call us directly at 210-281-1061. Step number 2, you gonna give us all the house facts, whether we're calling over the phone or on that form. We're gonna pick up the phone and call us, and or we're gonna call you, and we're gonna figure out all the house facts. What are all the details of your house? How much you are over leveraged? When did you buy it? How much do you owe on that house? Have you paid the taxes? What liens are on that property? All of that information is very important, and this is gonna help us understand how we can help you. Then we will review all the numbers together with you and come up with an awesome, great solution. That leads us to number 3. We'll develop an agreement, and I'll tell you most of the time, 95% of the time, we qualify almost every person because there's always a way to help somebody in real estate. So we sign an executed agreement. We put the date on that contract, on the date of your choice. What is the best date that'll help you and your family to put that date in there to be able to move out of that property? And then we start beginning to show the tenant buyers that property. So you have total control as we move forward in the process, and we will walk you through it. And then step number 4, we go to closing. So once we find that tenant buyer, you help us review that tenant buyer, you approve that buyer, we set up the closing with a real estate attorney, we complete the transaction, and it's all said and done. Worries are over. So call us today or go to housescash.com, fill out that form, listen to our 24-hour message at 412-712-SAVE, or call our office today. And remember, if your house is over leveraged, call us right now so we can help you solve your problem.